Hey folks, my name is Cyrus, and today I'm going to be doing my first tier list video, first of many most likely. We're going to be talking about the Searching Sparks metagame, specifically going into Sacramento Regionals, which I will not be attending, but I will be attending Toronto Regionals in a few weeks. And I have a lot of thoughts on the format as a whole right now. I don't think the meta game is going to be shaken up too much between now and between Stellar Crown format and Shooting Sparks format. But there have been some developments from LAIC, and there are certainly some new decks on the scene. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We'll just do the decks in order here. So we'll start with Ancient Box. I'm going to put Ancient Box in tier 3. I think the deck is fine, but it's still, it has typical Ancient Box consistency problems, as always. Let me zoom in a little bit more here. Perfect. So yeah, I think that it has solid matchups, but I think it's just sort of not good enough right now. I mean, it doesn't beat Drago consistently even. It doesn't beat Guardy consistently. Any of the decks that top aided LAIC really. Gholdengo obviously has a really good matchup in two, but it's just sort of like a mediocre deck at the moment. Next you have Lost Box, which I'm going to put in tier 1. Lost Box has gained the Pikachu EX, which is actually, at first I was a bit of a doubter, but I am kind of sold on Pikachu EX now. I think it really, fixes a lot of your matchups, gives you a really strong attacker that Lost Box, I think, has needed for a little bit. Sort of like a Roaring Moon EX type beat where, you're using it to one-shot stuff, but it's much more prize efficient because of the ability. Next, I'll put Miraidon here in tier 2. Very consistent. The Pikachu EX is a great addition for activating your Area 0 under depths, while also, not being super liable to being easily knocked out. It gives you a little bit more options. The Magneton is also a nice little consistency buff in the late game if you are struggling to find the energy that you need to seal the game. Next, we have Cloth. So I'm going to put Cloth in tier 2. I'm going to put it above Miraidon for now. I think that Cloth is actually pretty solid. It has good matchups into a lot of popular decks. It's okay in a Drago, solid into Polten Zard as well, but obviously farms Terapagos, farms Miraidon. Doesn't have a great Lost Box matchup, but and pretty bad Lugia matchup as well. But it's pretty solid overall. Very aggressive. The one prize aspect of the deck is a very nice bonus and gets to play cards like Blood Moon. Gardevoir, I'm going to put in tier 1. I've been pretty impressed with Gardevoir lately. I think that with the double rare candy has really changed the deck and how it is able to keep up with the current format. Just makes it a lot better at keeping up with these aggressive decks when you have rare candy as potential out. Gardevoir is just super strong right now, very consistent. Lots of options and lots of comeback potential, probably more than most other decks in the format. I think being able to play around Pheasantipity with Munkidori is really what sets the deck apart from a lot of other decks in its ability to make comebacks. Just disabling that option to draw 3 is so powerful right now since Pheasantipity is in so many decks. Dragapult. I'm going to say Dragapult is also solidly in tier 2. I'm going to go to the top of tier 2 because I'm a little bit unsure on this one. I almost want to put it in tier 1. Maybe I will create a tier 1.5 here. Add a row below. Or we'll do, this is tier 4. Two, 3, 4. Let's change the color of this. Sure, that works. Not really. We want to do this. Anyways, yeah, so I'll add another tier there because I don't like Dragapult being lumped in with these. I don't like Dragapult being lumped in with these. It's sort of it's the power level is just kind of low on Dragapult right now, which is kind of weird to say. Phantom Dive is such a good attack. It did finally win a regional in the Stellar Crown format. Deck is obviously very good. Has good matchups in Gardevoir and Lost Box, and pretty decent into Lugia, Drago, any Dusknoir decks in general. So definitely is still keeping up with the format, but just not quite as good as everything that's going to be in Tier 1 S tier. That I feel like have a good chance against everything. Charizard, I'm going to put Charizard in Tier 1 above Lost Box and Guardy. Specifically, I like the Charizard Terapagos build, that top 16 LAIC. I think that deck is like super cool. I think it has so many options. It's so versatile, super powerful. That is why I'm putting Zard in Tier 1. If it was just like regular Zard, I think I'd probably put it in Tier 2 with Dragapult, but I think that, I mean, Charizard is obviously just good in general. Charizard just does not, like, especially the Terapagos build, does not really have any bad matchups and keep up with this deck, keep up with Regidrago, keep up with other Terapagos decks. Just sort of has sort of options to deal with everything, and that is such a nice thing to have in a fairly consistent deck, especially in a best of 3 format where you can afford to maybe not be require a little bit more setup than something like Lost Box, which is like always super consistent. You can afford to maybe have a slower start or two and let your skill carry you when you have options to beat everything. Venomoth, terrible. Don't play this deck, just not good. Chenpao, unfortunately, I think I'm also going to put in terrible right now. I just don't think it really has a place in the metagame. Let's knock out a couple of these. Regigigas. Azumarill, I don't even know what a deck list for this would look like, so that is going to go in the terrible category. But then we have Palkia Terapagos, which, from what I've heard, is like, I have not tested this deck very much since it sort of had its resurgence with the Jet Energy build, but it's doing really well into Drago, apparently. Apparently, it really just doesn't one-hit Zard, which I do think Zard is spiking a little bit, so that's why I'm not comfortable putting it anywhere above Tier 2. I also think, like, just inherent power level is relatively low. It doesn't have that many options. Obviously, like, Moonlight Shuriken, turn 2, and, like, being able to one-shot stuff with Palkia is both very good, but I think that it just, comparatively to other decks, has a relatively low power level, especially in comparison to the other Palkia deck, which I will be putting in Tier 1. I think Palkia Dusknoir is still a phenomenal deck. I mean, it just won a special event. It has been top-cutting events pretty consistently, except for LAIC. It sort of had a drop-off, but I think that is partially just because people aren't really playing it right now either. Pokemon Dusknoir is a fantastic deck, has great matchups. It just has options to beat everything similarly to Zard. Especially if you go first, like, that kind of just sometimes feels unstoppable going first. Drago, I'm going to go ahead and put an S tier. It's won multiple events in a row now. Clearly has solid matchups and everything. Very consistent, very aggressive. Deck is just crazy good. I mean, you can even just win games that you have like a terrible first few turns pretty consistently. Not a lot of decks that can actually keep up with it consistently, and not even less decks that actually like are favorable into it. Roaring Moon EX, I'm going to put in Tier 4 with Ancient Box. I just don't think the deck's very good right now. You don't beat Zard. You kind of beat Drago, but like not always. You don't beat Lost Box. You don't beat Palkia Dusknoir. You don't really beat Gardevoir either. You don't beat Dragapult. So I mean, the list goes on and on. I don't think that Roaring Moon is very good right now. It's a very consistent deck, and it's really good at what it does, but what it does just is not good enough in the current format. Banette. So I'm gonna put Banette in Tier 1. Probably above Palkia Dusknoir. I think Banette Gardevoir especially. I mean, even above Lost Box. I think just has good matchups into Charizard. Can keep up with Regidrago. Good Lost Box matchup. Good, not a great Gardevoir matchup, but it's winnable. Good Dragapult matchup. Really good Raging Bolt matchup. That's something I haven't talked about a lot. Like, a lot of these decks up here also have good Raging Bolt matchups, which obviously Raging Bolt is still very, very popular, especially at major events. I think it's relatively simple to play. It appeals to casual players. It also appeals to competitive players who just want fast games and want to make sure they can close. So Raging Bolt's still pretty popular, and most of these decks at Tier S, Tier 1, other than Drago, which doesn't have a great Raging Bolt matchup, but can beat it. A lot of these decks just taking good Bolt matchups, also very relevant. Lugia, also going to go probably just in Tier 1, but at top of Tier 1. This is like the second best deck in the format, I think, after Drago. Has a favorable Drago matchup. Not a great Lost Box matchup. seemingly like not a great Charizard matchup or Terapagos matchup right now. I think that like both those matchups are kind of tough, especially the Zarpagos, obviously, but beats most other stuff. Like Guardy can also be tough, honestly. It just has some like top decks that are like really aiming to counter it, but it just kind of it is a problem deck for so many things. Like if you as Banette, that's the reason that Banette you might be scared to play Banette. That's the reason you might be scared to play Palkia Dusknoir. You don't want to hit Lugia. Um, Same with Palpagos. You don't want to hit Lugia. It's pretty good into Dragapult. Beats Cloth. Obviously, Miraidon pretty favorable into Lugia. But it beats most rogue decks. It beats the control decks. And it's very like I am always someone who doesn't think that Lugia is super consistent, but it can, especially since it's gotten Blood Moon, can like win games where it doesn't set up super well. I mean, you can attack turn 2 with Cinccino, even if, like for like a single prize, even if you don't get your Archeops down. If you play Raikou, you can attack with that turn 2, and yeah, you can Blood Moon to make comebacks. So I think that Lugia is just a pretty safe pick for most tournaments right now. Gholdengo EX, it's going to go in tier 2. I mean, the deck, maybe even tier 3. I think, the deck's solid. I mean, it top 4 at LAIC, came, like second, maybe just top 4 at a regional pretty recently. But, I just think it's pretty mediocre. It's not that consistent. It's pretty luck-based. You have to high roll kind of hard. Its matchups aren't that great. It doesn't have a lot of favorable matchups into top decks. It just has, like, some even matchups. And it's cool that it can like present us one prize board early on, but other decks just do this job better. The deck does not have a high power level and does not have amazing matchups into the field to where I would super recommend playing it. Pidgeot control, I'm gonna put up at S tier. People know I love this deck. I think that as much as I said Lugia is the second best deck in the format, I think that Pidgeot is realistically better than Lugia, probably even better than Drago matchup wise. I think the only thing that like hurts Pidgeot, I'm gonna put it at the top. The biggest problem with Pidgeot is like trying to close 3 games in time. Like you don't want ties. So and a lot of its matchups are really close, so you're not necessarily gonna win all of your rounds 2-0. So that can be like the question of like, should I actually play Pidge Control for a major event, or is that not giving me the optimal route to win 2 out of 3 games in a set? But Pitch Control can be teched to be favored into basically everything. It can be teched to have a favorable Lugia, it can be teched to have a favorable Drago, beat Zard usually, can be teched to beat Banette, favorable Lost Box most of the time. This matchup's pretty close, 50-50-ish. Gardevoir is one of its weaker matchups. Dragapult can be tech to beat that. Can be tech to beat Pokemon. Good Gholdengo matchup typically. Good Cloth matchup. Good Miraidon matchup. So it beats most things and doesn't have really any bad matchups or matchups that you can't tech for to beat if they aren't ideal. Cornerstone Melodic. This is just going to cover all Cornerstone decks. So Cornerstone Noivern, Cornerstone Mimikyu, Cornerstone Melodic. Any combination of those. I mean, even like the Iron Thorns Melodic Cornerstone decks. This is just a placeholder for all of them. I'm going to put that up here in top tier 2. I think you can build the deck to have favorable matchups into most of the metagame. I think you're always going to struggle with Gardevoir. You're always going to struggle with Dragapult, no matter which build you're playing. But you can build the deck to have like a relatively favorable Drago matchup, and then like relatively like a decent Lugia matchup, and then you kind of can beat everything else. You can beat Zard really easily. You can beat Lost Box really convincingly. Palkia's another matchup that can be kind of close. So you can build it to beat Terapagos pretty consistently, and then most of these other decks you just trounce. Like Gholdengo, you beat Cloth. Cloth is actually like a pretty bad matchup. Miraidon's good, Ancient good, Moon good. It just depends on how you build the list, but you can build it to wall out most of the format, and then you don't really have to do a whole lot. The games are fast, and you pull off your strategy very consistently. So if you hit a matchup that you beat, you're probably going to beat it. If you hit a matchup that you don't beat, you're probably going to have a tough time. But the deck, it's very good. I mean, if your deck doesn't have an answer to it, your opponent can't really do anything. Terapagos, I'm going to put Terapagos in tier 1 as well, up with I'm gonna put it like just below Charizard only because I like the Charizard Terapagos build better. But I think that Terapagos is also just like super good. I do think it's one of the few decks that I actually think its Drago matchup is fine. People tend to like have been saying that they don't like the Drago matchup. I think the Drago matchup like pretty good. Lugia matchup's good. Lost Rock matchup is fine. You don't really have any bad matchups up here. So that's what makes. I mean, what makes all of other than Lugia, which I think does have some weaker matchups up here. That's what makes like a lot of these decks so strong up in the tier 1, tier S is that they don't really have bad matchups against the other tier 1, tier S decks. Lostina, I mean, I'll put it in tier 4. It's probably not terrible. Like, it's probably not on the same level as this stuff. I mean, even Chen Pao, I'll move that up to tier 4 as well, just because like it's not as bad as the stuff that's going to go down here. They're real decks that just aren't well positioned. Raging Bolt, I'll put in tier 3. I mean, it's consistent. It does what it does. It has a favorable Drago matchup. Not something that most decks can say. But pretty terrible matchup spread overall. Like, other than that, you know, it has a bad Lugia matchup. It has a bad Charizard matchup. It has a bad Terapagos matchup. Lost Box. Palkia. Gardevoir. The list goes on and on. Yeah, it does not have a good matchup spread. Gholdengo, even. Cloth. Does not have good matchups. Raging Bolt is good because it's consistent, but it's and a lot of people play it, so it's going to keep getting results. But I don't think the deck is super mediocre. Iron Thorns. This is also going to go in tier 3. I think the deck is fine, but I think that Cornerstone, like both decks are kind of just sort of like trying to auto win or auto lose when you sit at the table, and I think Cornerstone auto wins more matchups than this does, and Snorlax I think also has better matchup spread than this does, so it's just kind of like, why would I play Iron Thorns when I can play Cornerstone or Snorlax? I can even play Iron Thorns in Cornerstone if I really just want to beat Lugia more consistently. So, not a huge fan of this. I think the Drago matchup's actually kind of sketchy. The Pidgeot control matchup's pretty bad. Lax matchup's pretty bad. Charizard and Terapagos matchup, like if they play Vitality Band, it's just like you kind of get trounced. Charizard matchup depends on what text they play. You know, if they're playing Terapagos with the Night Sentry Hoot, like that's a pretty bad matchup. If they play Cologne, that's a pretty bad matchup. Lost Box is not great. Even Palkia Dusknoir, like as long as they get their Greninja out, that's not like a great matchup for you either. So yeah, just not. Iron Thorns just does not have as good matchup spread as some of the other like auto win, auto lose decks. Snorlax was going to go up here in tier 1, probably just above Guardy and Pokenoir. We'll put it there. Snorlax can, you know, it doesn't consistently beat Drago, but it does, like, I'd say it's favorable into Drago. You know, it doesn't have a great Terapagos matchup, but it can beat Terapagos. It has a good Charizard matchup. You know, good Lost Box matchup, good Palkia matchup. It can beat Gardevoir. It can't really beat Lugia. That's like the biggest problem for Snorlax. But I think like it can beat most other stuff. You know, you farm Raging Bolt, you farm Iron Thorns. Rhydon's like a fine matchup as well. Cloth is a pretty good matchup. And yeah, like it can beat Drago relatively reasonably. So Snorlax pretty solid. Great Tusk Mill, I'm gonna put in terrible. I think that like it's probably the top of terrible. Like this deck can definitely beat stuff, but I think that like the better your opponent is, the less likely they are to lose to a Great Tusk. I think the deck just like is not actually like that good at closing games. It kind of relies on your opponent to like waste resources. Ditto Control, I'm gonna put this in terrible as well. This is a deck that All Out Blitzel played recently, but I think the deck's cool. Like I mean, I maybe even put it in tier 4. Like I think it probably does stuff. But I haven't tried it. I think that like it's definitely a gimmick. I know All Out Blitzel himself said the deck was bad, so I can't reasonably put it anywhere higher. I think that like it's just a cool deck. I'm sure it has like some solid matchups, but overall it's definitely more of just a gimmick. Ceruledge, I'm gonna put Ceruledge in tier 2. I actually think it's like just an improvement upon Gholdengo. I think it has like a pretty favorable Drago matchup. Definitely can't beat Controller Snorlax, but it has a favorable Drago matchup. It can beat Terapagos pretty consistently. It's pretty good into Charizard. Solid into Lugia. Solid into Banette even, as long as you get some energy and discard pile quickly. Lost Box, really bad matchup. Palkia Dusknoir, Not amazing matchup, but if you go first, it's like not that bad. I mean, you can even just like Moonlight Shuriken if you're playing the Palkia build, which I would recommend. Gardevoir matchup's pretty good. Dragapult matchup's pretty good. So like Ceruledge definitely has like a pretty strong place in the tournament. I mean, even put it at the top of tier 2. I think the deck is actually really good. It's just like not quite as good as the stuff in tier 1 and tier S, which I think is like I highly recommend people play. I think all of these are great plays for Sacramento. Do Gouging Fire next. Gouging Fire is going to go in tier 4. Right above Roaring Moon. We'll put it above Ancient. Well, no, I'm going to put it in tier 4. I think the deck's just not that good. It's just like another Raging Bolt clone. And I think Raging Bolt just does it better. Flygon. We'll put Flygon in terrible, probably. I think like there's some merit to this like hit and run strategy with like Mimikyu or Cornerstone, and you can finish stuff off with the second attack. But I think that the deck just kind of is mediocre. You require so much deck space to make like a reasonable strategy that wins games consistently with the deck, and then you just sort of struggle to set up. Let's see, we got Aegislash. So Aegislash can go in the terrible tier as well. I'll put it at the top because like obviously like it just auto wins some stuff. It's just like Mimikyu that does a lot more damage and has a lot more HP. But yeah, it's just not that good. It has lots of pretty bad matchups. Doesn't beat a lot of top tier stuff consistently. Deck's just not it's not super playable. Slacking as well, gonna go down here. I think that like the attack's super cool, it does so much damage, like the deck is really cool. I think the claws is just too much for it to be good, like where you can't attack if there's any if there's not any Roblox Pokemon, basically. I forget what the exact wording is, but I think like playing this with Noivern is pretty cool. I've seen that was like my original idea to make it work, and I've seen some people playing that in online tournaments, and I think that's really like solid. But I don't think the deck is actually real or good. United Wings also gonna go down here. It's United Wings. That's a repeat. I'm not gonna rate Lost Box Pika included with Lost Box up here. I'm not gonna rate them separately. Conkeldurr, terrible, but we'll put it like up at the top of terrible because it can actually like beat some stuff. Like 250 damage for 1 energy is like crazy. Can actually like beat up on some stuff. I know I'm Hydreigon doubter, but people I know and people who I honestly like respect are saying it's pretty good. I don't think I can justify putting it in tier 3. I'll put it at the top, or in tier 2. I'll put it at the top of tier 3 because I do think that like it's like solid. Like the second attack, if you can use that twice in the game, like that can just win in a lot of situations. The first attack is also really good. I mean, milling your opponent randomly so many times in a game is really good and gives you great lines in control decks. But being weak to grass is kind of a deal breaker, I think. Just like dying to overpawn really easily. I think the Drago matchup is terrible, and I don't want to play something with a terrible Drago matchup. And then the last deck, Archaludon EX, I'm going to put that in tier 4. We'll put it at the top of tier 4. I think it can beat some stuff, but it's just not that, it doesn't beat Dragon consistently, it doesn't beat Raging Bolt consistently, it doesn't beat Charizard consistently, it doesn't beat Lugia consistently. Really bad Lugia matchup, in fact. Really bad Raging Bolt matchup as well. You just can't really be taking a really bad Raging Bolt and Lugia matchups. There are other decks in this category that even have better spots. I just think that, Archaludon's pretty consistent. That's something that is going for it. I would just play straight Archaludon if I were to play it. I wouldn't play the Dialga V-Star build. I would just play Archaludon, Turos, and Barrel. But I think that you can't be losing to so many of these top decks. You lose the Gardevoir as well, so not a great deck. Well, that's where I stand for Sacramento. I think if I were going, I'd like to say that I would play Pidgeot Control, but I probably wouldn't be 100% set on that. Banette, Gardevoir, and Snorlax are other decks that I think are really, really strong. I've written articles recently on Ceruledge, which I also think is really strong. I have some students that might play, some sort of Lost Box variant. I think that Gardevoir is really good. I think that Lugia is very safe. And if you just want to turn your brain off, Cornerstone's always a good option. And I have been really liking Terapagos. I streamed it earlier today as of recording this. So I think that is a solid option as well. A lot of strong choices. I really don't think I'm a firm believer that there isn't just um, oh, if there's only one correct deck and if you don't play that then all the other choices are terrible. I think there's as long as you play a solid deck and you know how to play it, I think that comfort is king. So as long as you play something that's top tier, I'd recommend not playing anything below Cornerstone. Probably I probably wouldn't recommend Dragapult or Pokemon. So Cornerstone and above, I think all those decks are solid choices for the tournament. If you're comfortable with them and have tested them a significant amount, have a good list. Maybe less so Ceruledge. I don't typically recommend people play new archetypes because the lists typically aren't refined, but I do think Ceruledge is really good, and I do have a list out there in my article that if you wanted to play Ceruledge, then you do have a semi-refined list to go off of. And obviously you can also look at online results and stuff. It's just that typically new decks, the lists don't get super polished until deeper into a format. Even Charizard Terapagos, you could maybe have the same problem with, where it's a good group of players did take it at LASC, so they have a relatively refined list, but that was it hasn't actually seen that much play yet. So yeah, personally I would probably be sticking with Pitch Control, Banette, Gardy, or Snorlax. Maybe Lugia if I really just wanted to have a safe day. Alright, well, thank you everyone for watching. That is going to be it, and for everyone who is going to Sacramento, good luck this weekend. If you want to check out more of my content or find me anywhere else, my link tree is in the comment section, or the description, sorry. Alright, have a great one.